while we're waiting, just to mention the flyers you've seen on your seats there. Oh, and okay. So we're all here. So you're very welcome. You're welcome. And a special welcome to those who joined us for the first time tonight. So maybe just to say a word about the conversations, what they're about, and what we've been doing for the last 8 years. So we've been gathering every Monday night in topics to do with spirituality, theology, sexuality, human development, minority voices in Ireland, women's issues, many issues we've been looking at over 8 years. And this year, last year rather, we refined the conversations down to themes. So this year we're running them along 2 or 3 Monday nights on a particular theme or area. So the format really is that the speaker will speak, say a word about him in a moment, and then we'll then open the floor to a formal conversation. Not so much a Q&A, for a conversation. Yeah? We'll take a 5-minute break after Gerard has spoken, and then we'll reconvene and we'll have our conversation then. Right. One of the talking points at the moment in Ireland is the whole area of education, broad education, first of all, and in particular the whole question of church patronage, church governance, and then the question of some people look at the issue, is the classroom, is the school the place for faith formation? Are we giving instruction or faith formation? Are we giving knowledge, information, or faith formation? And that debate is going on. And we know in the church, beyond Ireland, decisions have been made already to do other things, i.e. to have more parish-based and school-based. So we thought that would be a worthy topic, given the state, the not necessarily negative state, but given the state of conversation happening in Ireland around faith education, we thought it would be a good topic tonight. Yeah? So we're delighted when I invited Gerard to accept the invitation. I know Gerard for many years. He actually was the man who took me to Rome as a joint seminarian and looked after me in my first year there. So we go back to the early 80s. Gerard is a native of just in the border of the diocese in Curraglass, in Connacht-Tallow, has been working as a priest in the Diocese of Cloyne, but more particularly also as diocesan advisor for a number of years, and has spoken elsewhere beyond here in Cork, has spoken on this topic throughout Ireland. So we're delighted that Gerard has come tonight. He's currently parish of Killavullen, the home of Nannaneagle. Yes, Nannaneagle, yes. So Gerard, the floor is yours, and thank you very much.
Thank you, Stephen. Thank you for the lovely introduction, Stephen, and it's great that we're resuming contact after some years. Yeah, great to see you here. So everything going so well, this wonderful gathering here. It's a great privilege for me to be here this evening. You must all be lonely hearts, given that you don't have a date or anything, or else you're celebrating the feast of Saint Cyril and Methodius. Maybe that's rather than Valentine. But at least we have each other's company for the next hour or so. And a topic that is always fascinating to me, as Stephen has introduced it there, should religious formation or education take place in the parish or in the school? So that is very much a live debate in Ireland. So the wider topic of literacy. So in second level schools, I know that became a really important issue 10, 15 years ago, when studies showed that literacy in Ireland was dropping slightly, especially in junior cycle. So a new junior cycle came about on foot of that, and the key goal is that to create a climate where children leave school fully literate in obviously reading and writing, also lots of other skills as well. But there is also a religious literacy. So religious literacy is something that's very challenged, I think, in Ireland today. If I ever meet a group of adults, say parents preparing for their child's first communion or confirmation, it's just amazing how little they know. You know, a lot of people wouldn't know, the Catholics wouldn't know the difference between the Old Testament and the New Testament, maybe something as basic as that even, or that there are 4 Gospels. So it's a very children or people who have had 14 years religious education between primary school and second level they leave that and then they grow up in the Catholic faith, but they seem to have very little literacy in the faith. So just to play around with that topic there for the next hour or so, and also just to discuss, like, what is faith in the first place? What does it mean to say that someone has the faith, has the Christian faith? What does that mean? And where does our faith come from? And who's responsible for it? So those kind of questions as well. Maybe we've been leaving too much to schools, and the system that we have now is based on a church that was there 50 years ago, but is no longer the case. So should we therefore change the way in which religious education is being delivered? So some of those kind of questions. So I think this is a time for discernment on all our parts. It's a very synodal word there, discernment, weighing up different things, coming to a judgment of right from wrong. What's the right path that we should choose now? Also, the word diacrisis, or discernment, was also a gift that certain people had when a person who was troubled about something went to a desert father or mother looking for advice. It was said that the really holy, wise person could actually just look at the person and tell them what to do straight away. They were able to discern on behalf of the person. So I'm hoping all of your expertise here tonight, now there's some Dominicans here as well, and that we'll all be able to discern what's the right thing to do, what's the future direction. I have a few suggestions at the end of the hour about steps that are underway, the evolution of the situation. But do you have any other suggestions yourself as to what we should do to address the crisis in faith, generally maybe, but the crisis in literacy in the faith as well? So yeah, those are the questions that we'll be looking at tonight. So literacy is a key idea in education, knowing how to read and write, but there's also religious literacy. So despite the 14 years of education and the many opportunities offered by the church, including opportunities like this to grow in the faith, few enough people are taking them up. So the enthusiasm of parents and their children at certain points in the journey of their faith formation, like communion and confirmation, that's quickly whittled away and lost. Those moments are lost soon afterwards. So examining those kind of questions. So I think there are kind of two basic, and then looking at what is our faith and where does it come from. So just to leap into that one there, what is our faith? So I think one very basic, simple way of looking at it is to contrast the Dominican approach, for want of a better word, the scholastic, or the approach of Thomas Aquinas, faith as a body of knowledge, from faith as an experience, the modernist approach of it. Faith as a relationship with God. So I think faith obviously is both things. It's both a body of knowledge, it's both content, and it's an experience as well. It's a relationship. So in the past, we certainly emphasized the former, a clearly defined body of doctrines, that was the faith. It could be handed to you, and you learnt it. You mightn't have understood it, but it sunk in some way by osmosis maybe. Whereas since Vatican II, the emphasis has definitely been on cultivating that relationship with God. And I'd just like to play a short piece by Dan O'Connor there, the author of the Grow in Love, the primary school program that's is fully developed now, fully rolled out within the past 5 years. It's been fully completed. I think it'll just be audio, though it's visual on the...
was one of the writers of the new programme Grow in Love along with Elaine Mahon. And I want to lay out a little bit of what's going on in the programme for you. But first of all, I suppose say something about passing on the faith to our children. It's not an easy thing to do. It can be difficult because we might know a whole lot about the faith tradition ourselves. We know something about it in bits and pieces, but we might be hugely comfortable about all the details and how to pass it on. But also, maybe our children aren't hugely interested either. And there's lots of distractions in their own lives. But the good thing is that we're not alone, that we have help. We've help from our parish community. There are lots of activities happening in the parish, and perhaps you're even looking at this talk in a parish. We also have help with passing on the faith tradition through our schools. And one of the things that's happening that's new in the schools is this new religious education program called Grow in Love. So I want to say a word about that. Let me begin with the title. Why this title? Why called Grow in Love? Well, it comes from an answer to this question. There's a professor in Boston College in America, Michael Himes, and he says, what's the least worst way to describe God? It's an unusual question. It's kind of cumbersome in a way. But he's getting to the point where whatever word you use, Father, Savior, Redeemer, Jesus, whatever word there is, it'll always fall short of the complete and utter fullness of God, who is the ultimate mystery of all that is. So what's the least worst way? He says is this: God is love. And he gets that from the first letter of St. John in the Bible. God is love. Notice what he's not saying is that God is loving, but that God is love. The implication being, where there's love, there's God. But it's not the only one who uses that phrase. Pope Benedict even wrote a letter, an encyclical, called God is Love. And at the very beginning, the very first page, he quotes from the scripture a passage which says, God is love, and he who abides in love abides in God, and God abides in him. And then Benedict, in his own words, says, these words from the first letter of John express with remarkable clarity. Watch this now.
That's great. Just to give you a flavour of it there, that's the underpinning of the Grow in Love series used in primary schools from junior infants up to 6th class. To contrast that with a few years ago, I was visiting Loretto Secondary School in Fermoy, and the principal there said she found this letter in the archives of the school. It was written to her predecessor by my predecessor in 1912, a Father Patrick O'Keefe, and the letter was co-signed by the Bishop of Cloyne, Robert Brown, the uncle of the photographer, Jesuit. So a very critical letter. He had examined the senior classes and he found them most unsatisfactory. They showed that they were very deficient in the positive knowledge. So faith was defined as a body of positive knowledge. So they were expected to know. They didn't know it. They had fancied themselves outgrown the catechism. So he was very critical of them. Can you imagine a principal today receiving a letter like that? They would fire it back in your face again, I think, and rightly so as well, because that's not the role of the church anymore, to inspect people's religious knowledge in that manner. But some of the issues raised in his letter are still resonate a bit, like religion is in a subordinate position. So as a diocesan advisor, I'm always reminding schools to try to elevate the status of the subject within your school. I suppose that part is ongoing, all right. So the vision of religious education as positive knowledge that could be learned regardless of the student's ability was typical of classical pedagogy. The First Vatican Council had defined the faith as a series of propositions about God and the Church, which could be neatly summarized in the Catechism. The accompanying authoritarian style of teaching that compelled children to memorize so much information had the effect of reinforcing the fearsome image of God widely invoked at that time. Something of that image was even transferred to people like myself, the diocesan inspector, whose annual visit must have seemed like the day of judgment to the children. The Second Vatican Council, by contrast, emphasised the personal dimensions of faith in God. Dei Verbum in Vatican II approvingly quoted the biblical understanding of Revelation as God speaking to humanity as a friend speaks to a friend. Coinciding with developments in education, there was a move away from the question and answer model of catechesis. Diocesan inspectors became diocesan advisors. Their function changed from primarily one of inspecting knowledge to primarily of one of supporting the development of faith. So it's probably unfair, however, I think, to criticise the pre-Vatican II approach unduly without appreciating its social context. The socio-religious failings of the pre-conciliar church and its times are well documented. But it was also a time when the believing community attended Sunday Mass, there was a vibrant parish life, family prayer mattered, and civic society was visibly informed by Christian values. The milieu of catechesis was much broader than what was happening just at school. So Plato used the distinction between mimesis and anamnesis. So mimesis, a mimicry, just learning something by rote or by heart. And then anamnesis, a living memory of something. So the two things aren't necessarily irreconcilable. When you hear an elderly person, even a person with dementia, recite a complex prayer formula that they learned as a child, you often notice that they are doing so from the heart and not just from the head. So the message has really sunk in. Having first been learnt in an objective way, it becomes internalized. Today there is far less coherence between parish, school and home. For the majority of adolescents baptised and confirmed in the Catholic faith, the school is the only partner actively involved in their religious development. One wonders when our generation, or younger generations, grow old, what prayers or biblical stories or statements of faith will they cling to in their hour of need? So let's have a quick look at what's the primary school program, because I think it really marries the two models of faith together very well. I just kind of picked out just one lesson I looked at there over the weekend. There are just one theme 6. So that would be looked at just after Christmas, typically in 6th class in primary school. So it's about the church, and the church is compared to a family, and like any family, there are disagreements, but the family stays together and has an experience together. So the model of the methodology used in Growing Love and in many other programs used from the Catholic Church's standpoint it was originally described by Thomas Grew, an educationalist in Boston College, an Irishman. The model of life, faith, life. You begin with the life situation on the topic, then you move to what does our faith tell us about it, and then you take it back to what does our faith, how can our faith influence our lives? So what does it mean to be part of any family? And then what was the Holy Family of Nazareth like? So the children learn about that. And then what unites, bringing it back to religion again, what unites our faith with the church? What aspects of our family life can be united with the life of the church? So there's a lovely song that's used in several moments in Growing Love called Connected. So I don't think maybe we have time to listen to it, but there's a primary school teacher here. Would you like to sing a bar of it?
Connected, you and I connected by love.
Very good. It's a beautiful song. So just the idea that we're all connected to each other. And there's a big question there. If Jesus was around today, how would he change our family lives, or what would he say to our family lives? There's also the idea that there are all types of family in the world today. It's not the traditional nuclear family anymore, so that's very much acknowledged in the unit as well, in the theme as well. But so there's a lot of traditional information about the church there as well. So the precepts of the church, the 5 precepts of the church, are covered in this theme here. And there's an idea of the Didache. The Didache was kind of an original 2nd century rule book in the church governing the life of the community. So there's a reference to that as well. So there's a lot of material there, both their own experience and the church tradition. So one of the aspects of Grow in Love that I like is that the fact that it combines the terminology of the traditional terminology of the Catholic faith and knowledge of the Bible, with the children's own experience. And at the same time, the program is child-centered. It reflects the spirit of the child, their zest for life, their instinct for justice. Grow in Love integrates the school-based study and celebration of faith with the promotion of the faith at home and a gentle encouragement that the child take part in the life of the church through their parish. However, of the 3 partners in faith formation, the school is still de facto the principal agent, and while all classroom teachers are expected to deliver RE, not all teachers see themselves as participant Catholics. All too easily, the daily time allocated to RE is set aside for more pressing concerns in the daily school routine. So that's just kind of a general overview of some of the situation. Just like you to maybe converse there now for a moment there, following Father Stephen's opening idea there. Which do you think is the most important factor in coming to the faith? The content or the experience of God?
Didn't us together for a while.
People maybe just share a thought there now from your conversation.
Knowledge is necessary. Knowledge is necessary to have some substance to learn from. We move on to faith as an experience.
It's like to know or observe. I know it's a strange thing to say, but if you don't know, you can't love. If you just know and if you stop there, then there's nothing.
Yeah.
So you start with, you need both.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So previously there was this kind of cohesive system of home, school and parish. So Martin Kennedy wrote a famous article in the Furrow in 1994 or 95 I think it was, called Islands Apart. So he said that the 3 islands where faith is formed, they've tended to drift apart. Everyone's doing their own thing, so to speak. And home is still a great centre of spirituality and passing on moral values and of faith as well. You know, people do have great devotion to God, but they don't necessarily connect that with either what the children are learning in school or with the parish. And likewise, the parish is finding it very difficult to connect with homes in many cases. I think we still have a relationship with most schools. And what the school is doing is fantastic, but it doesn't really reflect the reality of the life of the child in terms of how they're practicing their faith.
Father, I'd kind of disagree with what you say about the school,
Yes.
because I found I've 37 years teaching, and definitely I know now the amount of my colleagues, I'd say is probably, we wouldn't be like we're a large city school, who would be not they're originally Catholic themselves, but they're not practicing Catholics. So for them to pass on faith, it's a big ask, you know, because if you don't have that kind of innate belief yourself, or kind of that, you know, appreciating the importance of it, it's very hard to transmit it, you know. So, like, I kind of wonder, is it, like, I would never have thought, if you'd said to me 20 years ago, I'd been saying, is it now time for to evolve? But I honestly feel with the change in the structures of the schools, even in Catholic schools, with children who were baptised Catholic, they're not practicing at all. You've got then children from other denominations as well, and you have teachers who aren't practicing. And it's, you know, it's not the solid structure it was even 20 years ago, you know. It's changed so much. And that sounds really negative.
No, I think, thanks for the reality check. Maybe as a priest going in.
Well, you see, when the diocesan inspector comes around, what's everybody doing? Flicking through the, you know, getting the copies out, going through the stuff, practicing a few things. And even if you've done it, you'd be surprised about the amount of stuff, things they've forgotten that you've done, you know. Because I suppose that there's so much stuff in the curriculum anyway. There's so much other stuff even that isn't getting, like, it isn't just religion, but other subjects wouldn't be getting the time they're supposed to, because there's just so much to do in the day. And then COVID has been an added layer of stress inside in all of that.
Yes.
But
I suppose we've certainly been depending on schools too much. You know, I think we could all accept that, you know.
Well, it was like, it made sense, because after all, the church was funding the school, you know, it was paying, like, so it made sense there had to be a quid pro quo. But that's gone now, you know. But I suppose it's hard then when you've got parents who they're in theory they're Catholic, but you know, like, if I ask the children, you might make some comment about Mass, the amount of them who don't go, and like at the moment I'm teaching third class, so they made their whole communion. Yeah, so once kind of communion is made, they mightn't see the inside of the church again unless we bring them. But then they're not necessarily going. Like, they do have the few that do, but now maybe ours is because it's a city school, maybe my experience is a bit different, but even looking at, I suppose, living in a country area and seeing the amount of children at Mass, you know, it's not what it would have been when my own kids were young, like either.
It's a pretty low percentage on ours, there's no doubt about it.
And I suppose added to that, you've got the scarcity of priests, so you don't even have the contact of priests coming into the, do you know, you would have had it when I was in school, the priests were nearly all of it, they were very regular when I started teaching, they would be, but because you've got so few priests now, they can't even, like, it's not physically possible for them to do that, so. Yeah,
thanks for that reality check there.
Sorry.
Yeah.
Sean Corkery started a programme in Cloyne that about 15 parishes were running before COVID. It was a programme for parents grow in love of the Lord, and feedback he got from parents is that all the school programmes send us as parents stuff home from school to share with the children, but our adult faith isn't getting nourished. So what he started with this programme was a simple series of presentations and conversations on the main themes of the sacraments, but presented for adults in an adult way. And we're running it in Mallow, it's by Zoom. We're actually tomorrow night on the third one, which is the Lent and your child's preparation for the sacrament of confession. But rather than talking to them all night about their child's preparation for the sacrament of first penance, we go over again the meaning of Lent, conversion, and the sacrament for them as adults. and a surprising number of parents, we've been doing it by Zoom for obvious reasons, but somewhere between a quarter and a third of the parents take an hour and a half on a Tuesday night 5 times during the course of the school year to tune into this thing. So there is enough of an openness among a fairly substantial minority of parents.
At those key points, but then the rest of the time it tends to fizzle out again pretty quickly. So I think we all accept there is kind of a crisis in religious literacy. So I just want to kind of look at a few symptoms of it. They've already been mentioned in a sense, but I'll just kind of fly through them. So one is this one about just the sacraments of communion for the first time, as it's called in Grow in Love, and confirmation. So I think one of the obvious kind of symptoms of religious illiteracy is kind of a misunderstanding of the Eucharist almost, that it's for these key milestone events, but it's not the weekly gathering of the faithful of Christ, the local baptized people coming together to renew and celebrate their baptism and their faith in Jesus and His risen presence among them. So there seems to be like that is a misunderstanding in the sense that it can be difficult to celebrate a Mass for the communion for the first time with all of the exuberance that accompanies the occasion, the joy of the families and their sense of devotion to God. But then to know that they won't be there the following Sunday or following Sundays, and that there's a lot of emphasis on the material aspects of the celebration, but there isn't much on the real spiritual aspects of it. The Church has a duty, I think, to welcome all the baptized to the source and the summit of their faith, even when that faith is not properly nurtured by their families. The flame of faith is fragile at the best of times for all of us. At the same time, we have a duty to be true to the character of the Mass as an encounter with the risen Christ and among the communion of His disciples. So that's just kind of one symptom I experience of religious illiteracy. Another one would be, say, when I meet parents for a baptism, I have a monthly pre-baptism preparation meeting with a group of parents normally whose child will be baptized in the coming weeks. So that would be one of the slides I'd use in the parish office there. And I don't use that slide anymore because very rarely would the parents would know the answer to those kind of questions, like what Mass was a baptism traditionally celebrated at. They wouldn't have any connection with the Easter Vigil and with the renewal of their own baptismal promises at that Vigil Mass every year. And there's no sense about, the season of Lent as a renewal of our baptismal calling, and that there's no sense of the child being initiated into a community of faith. It's a family gathering, a family celebration, and a welcoming of the child into the family, their own personal blood family rather than the family of faith. So that's just another symptom. I think another one would be kind of like, maybe not getting too close to the bone here now, but a funeral Mass, the idea, the role of the eulogy at the end of the Mass. That word eulogy is a bit problematic. I think the funeral liturgy itself emphasizes prayer for the person and not praising them, So I think that obviously giving thanks for someone's life has a role within the liturgy, but we're also praying for them, and the Lord will forgive them as well. And so I think especially for people who aren't regularly practicing their faith, the entire focus seems to be on let's have a celebration of the person's life and give thanks to them and almost canonize them rather than praying for their salvation. So I think that's another little sign. And then one that cuts to the bone maybe a bit for any clergy man or woman here. The question, or clergy man, the question of we're not allowing females to celebrate Eucharist in terms of presiding. the question of mass stipends. So a mass stipend, like, it used to be a personal kind of arrangement between someone who wanted the priest to offer their, remember that intention at their offering of the Mass. It wasn't meant to be the intention for the whole congregation that was gathered. Even on a Sunday, or especially on a Sunday, everyone brings their own intention to the Eucharist, and that is equally valid as that one that the Mass is being offered for. And there's many other intentions that we pray for at the Mass as well. We pray for the Holy Father, for the Church throughout the world, for those who are sick. So it's not just the Mass for the deceased. So often now, the family that reserves a Mass expects that to be the publicly stated intention for the whole congregation, even at a Sunday Mass. So it misses the point that the Eucharist is offered on behalf of all the faithful, for the wider church and for the world, not just for that intention, which is a private arrangement between the donor and the priest for the financial support of the priest. So I hope that doesn't hit your finances, Andrew, too. Yeah. So am I being pharisaical for associating religious literacy with liturgical concepts and norms? Irish society has risen to the challenge of the pandemic with extraordinary generosity and love of neighbour. So the outpouring of grief, I think, that accompanied Ashley Murphy's funeral and her death also showed an extraordinary level of Irish human empathy and compassion that wasn't really linked to the religious aspects of her funeral as such. If charity takes precedence over theology, then we have nothing to worry about. So St. Francis of Assisi made the distinction between the form of the church, the structure of the church, and the form of the gospel, the gospel of love. So on the other hand, it was the ecclesial structures that helped to create a culture of compassion. That cultural reservoir is being drained today, I think, by the lack of religious values and literacy in society. So I'd like to move on a little bit there to second level religious education, which I'd be a bit more familiar with. So there has been a number of responses to the issue of religious literacy or religious illiteracy in second level education. In 1995, I think, before the new Education Act of 1998, the bishops wrote to the government asking them to do something about religious education because it had become a DOS subject. It was, people were playing cards during it. I can remember doing that myself in St. Coleman's College or Diocesan College, so it wasn't being taken that seriously. So the NCCA, the National Council for Curriculum and Assessment, devised this course for junior cycle originally from the year 2000 it was introduced, or was it 2002, back then at the turn of the millennium. So it was, I think it gave a great kind of boost to the idea that you could learn things in faith. There was a whole body of knowledge out there, and then you would learn skills as well around that. And they weren't going to be assessing faith, but they were going to be assessing your knowledge and your skills. And people who study it and who learn to use it, they will acquire the faith maybe as well as a result of doing that. I just want you to look at those questions, because those questions are, now I picked up maybe from the higher level of the old junior cycle, not the new one that's there since 2018. Just kind of, there's quite a challenging level of questions there. Or maybe I could ask one of the Dominicans there to just run through those answers to those questions there to see if you would pass your junior cert exam in religion. Stephen, pick out someone there.
Just got it there.
Okay. So the first one there is obviously Judaism, yeah. And the second one? Yes, the teaching on the resurrection.
Yeah. Socrates would be a more just political kind of context. And the Pharisees would have an emphasis on religion and experience, religious experience.
So the three synoptic gospels, is the idea of common vision would have been used as a translation of that word in the junior cycle syllabus. The leader of the Catholic Church in Ireland, so often they were expected to know the leader and the founder of the 5 world religions, the leader of alive today, obviously. So the kingdom of God was studied under 4 categories: parables, miracles, forgiveness, and table fellowship. So it's quite a detailed study of the signs of the kingdom of God. Ecumenism is dialogue between peoples of different religions. True or false?
No.
False, yeah. So the concept of interfaith dialogue covered the idea of dialogue between different religions. Ecumenism is between Christian denominations. So that was kind of higher level junior cert RE. So 1054, the Great Schism, and give an example of a sign and symbol that's also covered in both junior and senior cycle. Anyone like to give a quick example there of?
Something. It's about the 15th century, wasn't it?
The Great Schism? Yeah, 1054, yeah, I think it was it. The difference between a sign and a symbol? PD?
A sign could be a sign to Middleton, how many miles or kilometres, a symbol could be a wedding.
Yeah, yes, a symbol points to something more mysterious. And, yeah.
But how would anybody grow in faith with those questions?
I'm just kind of exaggerating to make a point slightly. But I think just thinking about religious knowledge and discussing it, and faith will happen maybe then, you know? It's more likely to happen, I think.
I was thinking of myself, I went to St. Mary's National School in Leinster, County Kildare, and I remember what the teacher said to me one day, which has lasted my whole life. She said, Imelda, when you say the Our Father, say it with confidence. I've never forgotten that, and it works for me every day of my life. So just teach the children to say it with confidence. The Our Father.
There's an interesting point about the liturgy that you raised. It just occurs to me. If you spent half an hour with a bunch of 16-year-olds on those 8 questions, or if you went back a slide and spent half an hour with them on the preface from the Mass for the Dead, in the Eastern Church it's very, very strong principle that the whole of our faith, both dogma and, if you like, the warm heart of our faith, both things are found combined in the liturgy. And somewhere along the way in the Western Church, we lost that connection.
It went into the head a bit more.
But even if you just went back there a slide, and you'll see how rich that prayer is. The whole of what the Church believes about death is in that prayer, in the form of a prayer.
Yes.
Yeah.
So I think a lot of you are maybe have described especially what you said about the crisis of religious literacy. So I just want to outline very quickly there 4 reactions to that crisis. So they just categories that Father Enda Lyons used many years ago. Would we just ignore it and carry on as before? Would we just give out about the situation? Will we try to restore an earlier church in an effort to change tack that way? Or will we explore new options? So I think each one has some validity to it. Each response is being used by the church. So we just ignore and just carry on and do our own thing. That's one response. Sir Humphrey Appleby, obviously, yes, minister going way back. So he used to always advise the Prime Minister, and if the Prime Minister wants to take an initiative, he said, just practice masterly inactivity, just preside and do nothing. And so Rome thinks in centuries, so we don't engage with the vicissitudes of a particular time. We just rise all above that, and we ride out the particular situation, and the stability of the church will carry it through. So all, those kind of good aspects of just ignoring the situation, but obviously there's a huge problematic aspect to it as well. It's like a patient who gets very bad news about their terminal decline. They will often just deny the reality of the situation. Now, that's a stage in coming towards accepting it at least. Just deny, so there's a lot of denial maybe within church circles of the crisis of faith and of religious literacy. That's one response. Another one is to deplore it, to be like an Old Testament prophet, to really condemn the present generation for their lack of faith. Yesterday's gospel there, the Beatitudes, had this idea of that it's a sign that you're a true prophet if you are being condemned by the spirit of by your age, by your peers, whereas a false prophet would be a very popular guy. So, but then again, the church has this image of always saying no to everything and always giving out, always being critical. Aren't we meant to be messengers of the good news, not of a condemnatory message? So it's not a very adequate response, though there are some good aspects to it as well. Another possibility is to try to restore the church. So the socio-religious history of Judeo-Christianity going back 3,000 years is always a pattern of decline followed by some kind of restoration or renewal or renaissance. So it happened during the history of Israel, it happened during the history of the church. St. Francis of Assisi certainly led a rebuilding of the church. The Second Vatican Council did as well. And 60 years after the council, the concept of restoration has a new meaning. The spirit of dialogue with the modern world, evident in the Second Vatican Council's documents, especially Gaudium et Spes, has been replaced by a retrenchment and a more defensive mentality. The desire of some Catholics is to restore a religious literacy that begins with the content of the faith, as expressed in the Catechism of the Catholic Church. So they prefer a more formal liturgical style, that style that preceded the Council, and it risks making the Church seem self-referential, its liturgies esoteric and uninviting. So the whole idea of the Second Vatican Council's invitation for people to participate and to walk together as pilgrims, that wouldn't be part of the restoration. Maybe that's envisaged by some circles within the Catholic Church today. And certainly it doesn't ring true to what's happening, say, with Grow in Love and with the RE as it's taught in second-level schools as well. So let's look at some ways of exploring. I think, we have little choice but to explore some new options. We just can't let things drift on the way they are towards terminal decline. So there has been some changes. So I think there is one of the main changes that's happened in second level, where I think the greatest change has happened really, is that we're very much distinguishing now between religious education and religious formation or instruction. So it's especially the new specification, the 2019 specification for junior cycle, it really is geared towards people of every faith and no faith. It favours no religion in particular. It's up to the ethos of the school to populate the syllabus or the specification with its own ideas and its own ethos. The word God is only used 3 times in the whole specification. And it's always used with God / the transcendent or the divine. The word Jesus isn't used throughout the course, whereas the previous one certainly did use all those concepts. So it's a much more religious studies approach to it. So, but I think the Vatican, in its documents on catechetics and Share the Good News, the Irish Church's policy on catechetics and on bringing up people in the faith, it accepts that distinction. Religious education as it's taught in school, in second level schools, isn't meant to be religious formation. A whole lot of the pupils don't see themselves as wanting to be formed in the faith, nor do their parents. A minority probably do, and the school would certainly promote it, but it won't dictate that type of previous formation in the faith, insisting on it. So schools are very inclusive, in other words, of all faiths and none. So it's argued that the skills and the attitudes acquired from the students' exploration of religion in general will stimulate reflection on their own personal faith commitment. However, the junior cycle specification does not encourage the celebration of the faith within the classroom. So I really miss that, holding prayer services within the second level classroom. That's no longer really happening. Even in Catholic schools, the class is taught to think in terms of this is what Catholics believe, whereas previously the teacher would have said, this is what we believe. The Catholic schools not teaching the course to state examination have adopted the state's non-confessional approach without the focus and structure provided by a state exam. So about half the schools are doing the junior cycle exam for RE. The other half aren't, and in fact most Catholic schools aren't doing it. And like those schools, they have this non-confessional specification that they're it's a very secular approach to teaching RE, and so they have that without the advantage of doing the course, the exam, the motivation and the learning that doing a junior circuit, including RE as one of your junior subjects, that would give you. So that's a bit of a drawback. So I'd just like to summarise that there. So examining RE, it has the definite advantage of improving religious literacy. It has given new energy to RE in second level. There's time allocation for RE is put on an equal footing with other subjects, and it's qualified teachers are teaching the subject, and it has a positive effect on senior cycle RE. Students have a good basis on religious knowledge that they carry into the senior cycle classroom in their discussions of religion. The disadvantages are it's designed for every faith and none. It's not a course designed, for example, around the liturgical year, which would be a very natural way of structuring RE in a Catholic school. So it's better suited to state schools, not to denominational schools or voluntary schools, as we call them. So there's less time for celebrating the liturgical year. So just exploring some new responses there to... I just have 3 ideas there about kind of new things that are happening to try to redress the deficit in religious literacy. So one of them would be, as Andrew was alluding to there, to using those opportunities like communion for the first time and confirmation to engage with parents. So a number of programs came out in light of that, like Do This in Memory and The Bridge. So they engage parents like once a month in a parish meeting, or Do This in Memory. The parents, their families are invited to attend Sunday Mass. So I think a lot of the regular people who come to Sunday Mass, they are not overly enamoured with the idea that children will just turn up for a couple of events leading up to First Communion and then they're gone again. It's neither here nor there. An idea that I think is catching on a bit more, and we have a room in the church, the parish church in Kilmullen, dedicated to it, upstairs. The children leave during the Liturgy of the Word, and they go to a room, and to the parents who are trained in how to lead the Liturgy of the Word, have the Sunday readings explained to them in a child-centered way. Then they return to the congregation at the Lord's Prayer. So it's a bit like a kind of a catechumenate type exiting and then coming back at one point of the Mass. So that's one idea. There's a video there, but I'm not sure how we're doing for time there. You want to watch a quick, let's see. I don't think it's going to work. Another one is the new ministries that are developing within the church. So that have been announced by Pope Francis in the past year. So the ministry of lector, of acolyte, and of catechist, especially the one catechist is in priestess parishes in Latin America and Africa. They would all have a well-trained catechist, leading people in the faith and accompanying people in their faith. Pope Francis is really emphasizing the idea that they're not teachers, they're accompanying people in their faith. So just 3 weeks ago, he had the first catechist was installed, so they're not just commissioned on a temporary basis, they're formally installed in the ministry. So maybe that little clip might be worth it, because I'd love you to just, if we can just open it there. So there are already many lay people involved in ministry and pastoral or quasi-pastoral roles in parishes, including secretaries, sacristans, lectors, ministers of the Eucharist, baptism team members, choir directors, and members of pastoral councils. In the absence of theological formation, these volunteers are likely to function as helpers rather than collaborators, or to focus on the bricks and mortars of the church rather than its spiritual mission. So the ministries of catechist and lector and acolyte will help to give people proper roles within church leadership and form them properly for it. I think it will make a difference in terms of...
Could you explain acolyte to me?
Oh yes, very good. So these ministry are acolyte and lector are formally steps on the road to the priesthood. So acolyte is, so it's classically, it's just distributing communion. But say in the Diocese of Killaloe, it's kind of been given the title of pastoral carer, so bringing communion to the sick, assisting those who are housebound, to keep the link with the church alive for them. So it can be extended to it. And lector doesn't just mean proclaiming the word of God, it also means maybe if a priest isn't present, leading a liturgy of the word instead of having mass.
Sorry, Father, would the new deacons be part of this ministry?
Again, it's another ministry rather than being integrated. So there's a variety of ministries emerging within the church, and it's not a matter of them replacing the role of priests, but having their own ministry, rather than acting as many curates, as I heard someone saying.
And Father, when will the female diaconate?
I don't know. It's being explored, I think, by a Vatican Commission, isn't it?
I hope so.
It is, yes. It is being explored by a Vatican Commission. Yeah. So it mightn't be like the male diaconate, it would be a female diaconate. So that's what's being explored.
I understand when they announced deacons in Fermoy and they had leaflets and there wasn't Fermoy deacons name. Very strange.
Yes, at the moment it's reserved to male.
Reserved, yeah.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah.
So I just have one final idea there as well, so just a little kind of stimulating, just throw away title there. Watch out for flying saucers. So Carl Jung, the Swiss psychologist, so you remember flying saucers was a big phenomenon in the late 40s, early 50s, in the United States especially. The United States had become totally enamored with technology, with the bomb. Science was going to conquer all human ailments. So God was kind of almost dead, But that's when people began to see these strange discs spinning in the sky. So Carl Jung said that God was asserting himself or herself. Technology can go so far, but God's presence will reassert itself again. So God will only stay down for so long. I think if we try to cultivate good liturgical experiences, keep people open to the idea of mystery in their lives, and witness to the faith ourselves, then that will in itself give good example in how to pass on the faith and how to be motivated to learn more about the faith. So those are just kind of 3 quick ideas there on like new avenues being taken by the church, especially those ministries there. You know, new ways of celebrating the Mass, family-friendly Masses, rather than just focusing on big choreographed events, single events like communion for the first time. And then not being afraid of mystery and not dumbing down the mystery of God, you know, keeping the liturgy alive as a mystical experience. And people are looking for something beyond entertainment, buying new stuff. So they will eventually tire of that, and they will want to engage with the life of the church again, I think. So will we just form little groups there again for a moment?
Mm-hmm. Or if you like to take if you wish to take a few minutes break,
yeah, sure.
Yeah, okay. And we can come back in 5 minutes, okay? Okay. Stretch it outside for
a few final, or a few questions, or not questions, just contributions. Let's just look at that introduction of the ministry of catechists to the church. It was a historic moment on the 24th of January.
Pope Francis celebrated Mass in St. Peter's Basilica for the Church's 3rd annual celebration of the Sunday of the Word of God. For the first time, he used a revised rite for formally installing new lectors in the Church, a ministry which the Pope opened to women last year, as well as a new rite for the ministry of catechists, which he established in May.
Sono chiamati al compito importante di servire il Vangelo di Gesù, di annunciarlo affinché la sua consolazione, la sua gioia e la sua liberazione raggiungano tutti. Questa è anche la missione di ciascuno di noi, essere annunciatori credibili, essere profeti della parola nel mondo.
After the Pope's homily, 6 women and 2 men from South Korea, Ghana, Pakistan, and Italy knelt before the main altar to receive a blessing. They approached Pope Francis one by one, who gave them each a Bible, and formally installed the first woman in the ministry of lector with these words.
Riceve il libro delle Sante Scritture e trasmetti fedelmente la parola di Dio perché germogli e fruttifichi nel cuore degli uomini.
Amen.
The 8 candidates for catechists from Spain, Ghana, Italy, Brazil, Peru, and Poland then came before the altar. The Pope blessed them before giving each of them a crucifix and formally installing the first catechist in the church.
Riceve questo segno della nostra fede, cattedra della verità e della carità di Cristo. Annuncia a Lui con la vita, le azioni e la parola.
Amen.
It was the first time this rite, prepared by the congregation for divine worship and the discipline of the sacraments, was used. To close the Mass, the Pope then processed out of St. Peter's Basilica with the same papal ferula, or pastoral staff, used by Pope John Paul II.
So just there, anyone on that issue, especially about how the church could play a more active role in handing on the faith, as opposed to delegating it to schools where it's becoming more and more problematic. So what can the church do to promote literacy in the faith and help families, or through the liturgy? Anyone there like to contribute anything on that?
Is the idea of these catechists to work outside school, set up their own groups, or
yes,
and it be a separate thing altogether?
Yes, it is. Yeah.
Would it be useful for including the kind of religious dimension that the school used to look after? Say, looking after the confirmation kids, looking after the first communion kids, you know?
Yes.
Would that be?
I think so, yeah. And also, I think, maybe we've been focusing too much on just those 2 moments. The whole adult literacy and faith. So there is the old cliche, Jesus blessed children and spoke with adults. we just bless adults and speak to children. So we should be maybe beginning more from the adult faith and letting the adults pass on the faith to their children then.
So Andrew, the hand of the answer.
I'm not a teacher, but I have 4 children who are now adults. And I think, personally, I believe very, very strongly that the context doesn't always matter as much as the way in which the message is conveyed. And I believe that it's very difficult to imagine in the kind of world we have now that we are going to be able to give children, any of us, whether we are clergy or parents or teachers, it's very difficult to imagine we're going to give any child any sense of the joy and consolation of Jesus' message unless we do it, every single one of us, in whatever role we play, with a real enthusiasm that actually conveys to the child, this person who is telling me believes this, has solaced themselves in this. And unless we succeed in doing that, it doesn't matter where we're trying to do it, whether we're trying to do it in a church or in a school or at home. And the other thing that I feel very strongly, and I think it's interesting in terms of the mention that you make between the body of knowledge and the experience of faith. I think that the two events that you focus, I don't mean you, but you understand, that are focused on in educating Catholic children in their faith, the First Holy Communion and confirmation. I think that both of those should be an introduction to each child into that personal experience of faith. And because they happen in the way they do, where there are hordes and hordes of children all having the same experience at the same time, so it almost becomes, or it almost seems, and I don't in any way to be disrespectful, more like a kind of inoculation program, rather than an opportunity for the child to get a glimpse of where their faith might bring them, and also for the child to get a glimpse, in the case of Holy Communion and of confirmation, of the real significance of what they are experiencing at that moment.
I suppose one thing in our parish now, is that the children for communion now this year, they actually have to fill in, the parents have to actually seek out to have their children receive communion and for confirmation, which kind of puts the onus back on the, which actually is a better, it's been as a result of COVID, but it's a positive thing that they actually go and actively seek communion and confirmation rather than just going in this, as you were saying, mass inoculation thing before. So that's one positive, I suppose.
And is that a general approach?
No, well, that's just in our own parish.
Yeah, but I'm worried about, no matter how good it is, and it can be really very good, there seems to be a very tiny minority of those children will come back consistently afterwards. That's.
Father, would you think that the synodality that Pope Francis is promoting within the church at the moment, would you think that when that becomes kind of, people get familiar with it and it means something to them, would there be any chance that might encourage people?
I think the average person doesn't know the first thing about it, or they don't really, it doesn't connect with them as such, even though it is a very wonderful concept. It's what Vatican II is all about, really, but it's just not. A lot of people are just using the church from milestone events in their lives. It's a service to mark a moment in their lives. It's a way of doing that, rather than coming from their own personal faith. I think a lot of it, But at the same time, those occasions might be, times when faith is kindled, so you have to allow for that possibility as well.
I really think that the synod idea
is something, first of all, we know nothing about it because we haven't been communicated well about it. Other countries have been kind of taking it up and running with it. But I think that goes further back than any program in catechetics. It seems to me it's a process of formation of the church to listen to each other, you know. And it's been so hard. I'm a cleric, and I'm used to getting up there saying things, and I find it hard just to listen. And I think that's part of our problem, that our leaders are probably frightened to be exposed to the huge wisdom that is there and that is voiceless. You know, our teachers, our parents, our elders. There's a process that we're being deprived of by probably not taking it more vigorously. And I think it would support what you're saying there.
It would be a way of engaging, people would feel more really, you know, not just words on our part inviting them, but they would really feel engaged if they were really listened to them. It's true.
Sure, the other reality is that we're not here in Ireland reinventing the wheel. We only have to look across the water into England and to the church on the continent, and you mentioned Africa and South America, where this has been going on for years, you know. And, you know, in one sense, it's a great moment, I think, you know, this so-called crisis has two sides to it. It's a great moment. I mean, the thing is falling asunder, but we try to prop up. And if we look at the experience of the Catholic Church and other churches in England and on the continent, and my experience of working in Africa and in France, is that this stuff is going on for years. It's vibrant, and also it's done without panic. There's a bit of panic going on here, I think, you know. And I really see it as, maybe I'm over-optimistic, I see it as a moment of grace, in actual fact. And what we do with it now is up to us. But we needn't feel, oh my God, you know, this is all new. It's not new. It's not new. And it's happening universally. And we can learn from others. We can learn from others. And some of you here, I know, have worked in countries in Africa and in the Caribbean. So, you know, people can bring their experience to us, you know. But I think this panicking and you know, as if we have to sort it out. I mean, come on. Go back to the Acts of the Apostles. One of the first questions they had to look at, how do we welcome outsiders? They're a pluralist community. They weren't a monolithic. You know? And we need to relax with that one. Otherwise we're bent into
panic even. Like.
The panic that I think, what I feel is if today, I spent the whole day on retreat with primary school kids. The whole day today. Okay. And for the kids when they arrived this morning, confirmation class, Cork City School, Catholic school, Christian Brothers school. So we're atheists for them, you know. But we're here today. We'll join today. We join everything. Okay. I was talking to the teacher and the SNA during the break, and they were representing the panic. They were worried about the situation of the kids. Their kids getting confirmation in a few weeks' time, and then exiting. You know. But they spoke in very nervous terms about this happening. I said, well, what other choice do the kids have? Really?
Yeah, but the past few Mondays, we've been kind of hearing about the need for synodality and a mentality of listening, you know?
Yes.
Now, I don't think there's a kind of a panic there, but there is a sense of urgency that here in Ireland, there has been a kind of almost a deafening silence about synodality.
Yes, I agree.
And you know, places around the world are moving ahead, thank God. And I agree with you. An image came to me there when you said about the church in Ireland, where, you know, I was thinking of those houses up and down in Galway, Micah, was it?
Yes.
You know, they were lovely plastered and everything. Next thing, when someone hit against it, the whole thing crumbled, you know. There's a kind of a sense of us having a kind of a sense of the church in that, with a nice plaster on it, but it'll crumble, you know. And maybe that's, as you say, an opportunity and a good thing. But I think we have to recognise it for that, you know. Yeah. and that there is a big kind of shortcoming here in the Irish Church of kind of leaders listening, you know?
But what struck me, working with kids here week after week in school, their huge interest in a form of spirituality. You know, we know the saying, we're spiritual and religious. But we must take seriously their interest in respect for the earth, for the environment. I mean, that's saying something about the kids themselves, okay? It's saying about their interest in the sacred, about the beauty and awe and respect. So deeply spiritual, transcendent values. Okay, they're not instructional, formative values where we like them to be. But by God, I am humbled by these kids. I really am. I'm just going to have to say it. I am humbled by them.
But I think they don't find that meaning then with people when they go to Mass on a Sunday.
How could they?
Right, but that's, like you talk, like, I feel that there's a measure in the Catholic Church that you're not being Catholic unless you turn up to Mass on a Sunday. This idea of obligation and this idea of having to turn up. Whereas, and I agree with the previous speaker about living the message and transmitting that to your children or whoever it is you're dealing with. And what it comes back to me from, and I think it links in with the listening part as well, is about inclusion. So, when I bring my children to Mass, well, I don't feel included because it's all about keeping them quiet. And then you get tutted at if they're not quiet.
Yes.
You know, so they're a bit older now, so that's not as much of a thing. But, I commend you for what you're doing with the work on taking the kids away, you know. I think that's very meaningful, I really do. And I think that when I was young, we went to Mass partly to meet our friends. It was a community thing, and I think that is something you do very well here, where you used to have the Mass and the cup on tea afterwards, and it's something that I know I have friends who are in churches of different, Methodist churches, and they have this kind of shared community afterwards where they meet for a cup of tea and that kind of stuff. And I think it's a wider question then of inclusion, where you're including, you talked about the junior cert cycle, including all the people of all faiths and none or whatever, but yet I don't feel that the church is actually fully inclusive, because some people are accepted and people who might be different or have different orientation, sexuality or their own views or whatever, they're not, my opinion is that they are not accepted, and that we have children in schools who are, they're all different, but some of them don't feel accepted and don't feel accepted in certain schools, so if you're looking at maybe things that need to happen, I think proper and true inclusion, would be a great help.
Should priests turn down children for baptism if the parents don't go to Mass? I'm in that position at the moment. I've got two grandchildren, two beautiful divine children. And the first one was baptized, and when they came along to the second one and the third one, the second one, the priest says, "Did we go to Mass?" And the parents said no, they don't, because they were so busy looking after the young children. And he refused. And he's not 100 miles away. And they have another baby since, the third one, and they're hoping that they will get them baptized. But they can't go back to where the first one was baptized. And that's enough to turn anybody off, because surely a child, an innocent baby like Jesus, could be, he brought the rest of us along, we didn't know anything. Surely a child could bring the parents back.
But I wonder what is the thing, what is making them want to have their children baptized? There must be something innate in them. That's one thing,
that's absolutely very spiritual, wonderful people.
And that's the problem.
It's just a matter of time with babies,
And that's the problem I have in school. I'm trying to teach the New Grow Love program, because I'm trying, I feel sometimes that I'm trying to water down, because some of it is so dogmatic, I suppose. I know the children in front of me, and I know the thing I'm talking about. And like we did a third class at the moment, and we're doing the first 3 commandments, because we're doing about Moses and all that, about the commandments and the first 3. And what was it, right? Thou shalt not remember to keep holy the Sabbath day. I'm going to explain that one. thou shalt not take the name of the Lord thy God in vain, and shall have respect for God, thou shalt not take the name of God. And they're given in the language, I'm the Lord thy God, thou shalt not strange gods before me. And one of the children, these are third class to me, but Miss Farmer, what about if somebody wants to marry, if somebody is a Catholic and they want to marry somebody else who isn't, then what happens there with their God then? So I'm going, well, what am I going to do here now? So, you know, they're talking like that you have money or power or what, you know, that they're not the important things, that God, like that's not the answer. But you know, it's those kinds of things. I remember in 6th class children asking me, do you actually believe in all this stuff? I mean, I was floored. I said, how do I answer this? And I said, well, my attitude is, I do, yes. And I believe in it, and it gives me strength and whatever, and if I'm worried about something, I can say a prayer and whatever. I said, when I die, if there's nothing there, it's not going to matter to me because I'm dead, and it's not going to matter. And if I'm not, if it is there, I said, how great is that? So I said, yeah, I do believe. But I would never have dreamed of asking my teachers years ago something like that, but the children now do. And they're valid questions, and it's how to answer them. You know, it's yeah.
I'd like to be in your class, very engaging. So I think on the question of baptism, it's, I mean, I would try to remind parents of the different ways that they can practice their faith. There are many different ways, you know, not just Sunday Mass, that's an important one, but it's not the only one. But we'd hope that they would, you know. But there's many other ways as well, like living ecologically, even is another one that Stephen mentioned. Praying at home, you know, saying grace, having table fellowship at home. There's a whole lot of different things they can show. That you ask them at the door of the church, do you promise to love God and to keep, what's the wording exactly, and to keep the commandments, you know? And they say, I do, and you take people at their word, you know, at that point.
Yeah, but I think it's unfair to ask them because they may not have arrived at that place in their life where they actually do believe in God. They're just working through things.
Yeah, I think we have to.
I think you accept the person in good faith if they bring their child.
Yeah.
That there's a hope there, and hope is very important in the life of anybody.
Maybe there are cases where, and this is part of just leaving behind the cultural identity of being Catholic, you know, people need to make choices a bit more now as well, you know. They can postpone, wait a while, you know, until they feel that they do want to engage, you know, with
There's
a bit
one
more.
Spirit, one God, and I honestly think sometimes that we do our best to divide the Spirit. By even the way we treat women in the church, and you know, the more I think about it in my head, I can't take it all in sometimes, believe me. It's just too much sometimes.
Yeah.
Thanks. Thank you for your presentation.
Thank you very much.
But I'd just like to concur with some of the speakers here earlier. I agree with Anne and what this lady here was saying, and Father Joe, especially about the synod. I think, you know, the institutional church, there's big emphasis on confession, and I think the church itself is very slow to forgive its own people. I don't see any forgiveness coming from the institutional church. There are priests who have been excommunicated for very wrong reasons. They're subject to excommunication, and there's no sign of any door open for them. Father Flannery being one just that comes to my mind. The Synod, Pope Francis is one of the nicest popes we've had for a long time, and he's doing his level best. He's plenty of opposition. He set up the Synod. We haven't heard one word about it in Ireland, and I agree fully with Father Joe. It's a listening process to give people all over the country in parishes and in dioceses some opportunity to voice what they feel will enhance and bring the church forward, and the people with it. And this whole thing about the position of women in the church is, you know, practically antediluvian at this stage, and they still don't get it. And I think, like Renta says, any person presenting a baptism ought to be just baptized, you know. The Lord decides, not us.
Jesus said
that's
like
that's
children come.
You know, so I think there's loads of ways that could be doors opening and great things happening, because it's a glorious moment, as Stephen says, to reconvene and rejuvenate and renew, because post-COVID people were all looking for some way of being more joyful again, and building up our communities which are kind of limping along, coming out of it. There's a lot of malaise there. It's been described as a COVID hangover to me at the moment. Some people are still scared, they're lost, And, you know, the sacraments are a wonderful way for families to celebrate their child's lives and their chemos, the communion and confirmation. And, you know, the whole question of obligation may be a bit too much at the moment, because people are doing their best. They're doing their best in their own ways, and people are very ecologically minded. Now, there's not a lot of good happening, but there's no one this, you know.
I think I do notice Sunday Eucharist, there is more of a more of a vitality, but I think it's because of the pandemic as well, that people are more engaged personally and in their own lives as a result maybe of the lockdowns, and just having to reflect on the fragility of life, and then really hungering to engage with the community again. And again, the experience mightn't be ideal, some boring at times that, but people are getting something out of it. It's probably the best attended event every weekend in Ireland, I think, by a long mile, that even though it's totally underreported as such, but a lot of people are getting a lot out of coming to Sunday Mass, you know.
The thing that occurs to me every Mass I ever say, and that's that one huge change that has happened in Ireland, and it's absolute at this stage. There is nobody at Sunday Mass who isn't there because they decided to be there. Because nearly everything in our society points away from it nowadays. So if you're there, and I sometimes say this to people, if you're here at Sunday Mass, you're making a very strong statement in today's world just by being here. And the other thing it encourages me is that I will never, ever, ever in a sermon tell the Christian people what they should be. I'll tell them what they are. You are God's people. You are the people who belong to Christ. Because they are. They wouldn't be at Mass if they weren't.
So, Corpus, any closing comments? So maybe before I give my vote of thanks to Gerard, just to let you know what's coming up. For those of you who are new for the conversations, you find the programme in your seat. You also find the programme of Ennismore, of the retreat programme. And we have another one coming out, a supplementary one coming out. And also you'll find a leaflet, Father Bernard works in Dominican publications that are offering a discount to everybody in the audience. Some of the Dominican publications, you'll find a leaflet there concerning that offer. Bernard will answer any questions you have there on the offer. Next week we're changing gear for the next 3 weeks. As I said in the beginning, we're going on themes. So we're now moving into Scripture, and we're looking at three topics. We're inviting Kevin Hargadon. Kevin is a director for the Centre for Faith and Justice in the Jesuit Centre in Dublin. He's also a Presbyterian minister. So he will lead us on the topic, Praying for Change, the Our Father and Questions of Justice. So someone quoted the Our Father earlier, praying for, like with Imelda or something. So he's looking at that. Then Father Sean O'Sullivan, who some of you will know. Sean is the parish priest of the parish of the Passage and Harbour. That's the Harbour parish. Yeah. So Sean published an article some time ago on this Irish Phoenician woman, which was really got great reviews. And so on the basis of that, I've invited Sean to lead a reflection. And then finally, in that section, we invite Rosie Maloney, one of our own, a Cork woman, and was teaching for a number of years in Cork, principal of St. Angela's. Recently finished a doctorate in Scripture, and she will look at the hidden treasures, the Bible in Ireland yesterday, today, and tomorrow. So Rosaline's theme isn't 1,000 miles what we were looking at tonight. You know? She will look in particular at the role of Scripture in Ireland, in the Irish Church, in Irish society. Yeah? So those are the three, beginning next week. Questions of the Our Father and questions of justice, in Sean O'Sullivan, and then Rosie Maloney. So in inviting Gerard tonight, I invite him because I know him for a number of years, but also he wrote a very fine article in the Furrow on this topic tonight. And when I read it, I said, we must get him. So I know he's not only a parish priest, but also busy with other things he's been called upon to get involved in adult education, even at the episcopal level. So for coming this evening from a rather busy parochial life, we were very grateful. But more importantly, Gerard, I think your own, and I've known you for a number of years, your own passion for this area and your kind of quiet, gentle way of doing the job you do, as opposed to, I was saying to Yvonne earlier, we dreaded diocesan inspectors coming around, you know. But you certainly have brought that very gentle style, so a style of gentle conviction, was Anne was saying, you know, that you live what you instruct in the school. So for that passion for the gospel way, that passion for accompanying young people and accompanying teachers as well, we thank you, and we're honoured that you're here tonight to help us to stimulate the conversation. Thank you.
Thank you.